we seem to be living in this era that's just pathologically obsessed with all or nothing. You see it everywhere.
Oh, absolutely.
It's either go beast mode at the gym, in the office, achieve these impossible levels of productivity,
Right.
or you're a failure. You should just stay on the couch.
Right. And then in conversation, it's either, brutal, unfiltered honesty,
Right.
or you have to tiptoe around every single topic so you don't offend anyone.
It is so exhausting. And I think because we're always swinging between these two extremes, we've started to see balance as, I don't know, boring. A mediocre compromise.
Yeah, we think it just means giving up, that you're settling for something safe in the middle instead of, striving for peak performance.
Exactly. But what if that's completely wrong? What if balance isn't a compromise at all? What if it's actually the highest form of high-performance skill?
Skill.
Something that demands incredible precision, constant adjustment, and real excellence.
Well, that's the mission for us in this deep dive. We're stepping out of all that modern noise and going back, way back, about 2,300 years to ancient Athens.
And to a very specific thinker.
To Aristotle. He's the philosopher who really laid the groundwork for what we now call virtue ethics. Honestly, you could say he invented the whole self-help genre.
Aha, that's probably true.
But we're going to look past all the abstract logic and really focus on his practical guide for a fulfilling life. And it all centers on this one key concept, eudaimonia.
Right, and eudaimonia gets translated all the time as just happiness. But when you dig into the sources, you realize that is, well, it's a terribly lazy translation.
It is. It misses the point entirely. It really means flourishing, or maybe a life well lived.
It's more active.
It's completely active. It's the highest possible state of human functionality. That deep satisfaction you get from operating at your absolute calibrated best. It's something you do, not just something you passively feel.
So today we're using the sources you brought to the table to really understand why your life might feel like this constant, draining tug of war. And more importantly, how you can start using Aristotle's framework to hit the bullseye of excellence every single day.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's unpack the actual structure Aristotle gave us.
Yeah.
His most famous idea here is the doctrine of the mean. You'll often hear it called the golden mean.
Right.
And to really visualize this, don't think of it as like a rigid line. I think a better analogy is a fine-tuning slider on a mixing board. You're trying to dial in that perfect sound.
That mixing board analogy is perfect. It works because it implies precision. For any human quality, Aristotle says there are 3 points on that slider.
Okay.
On the far ends, you have the 2 vices. There's deficiency, which is too little of something, and then there's excess, which is too much of it.
And the sweet spot.
The virtue, the thing we're aiming for, is that razor-thin sweet spot right in the center. The mean.
Okay, let's ground this. The classic example is always courage.
Perfect example. So if you have too little courage, you slide that dial all the way down. That's the vice of deficiency, which is cowardice.
You let fear stop you.
Exactly. You let opportunities pass you by, you don't take necessary action. But if you slide that dial all the way to the other extreme, you hit the vice of excess. That's recklessness.
This is the person who confuses taking stupid risks with being brave.
Yeah, they run into danger for no good reason, and they often end up hurting themselves or other people in the process.
So the virtuous person, the one who hits the mean, they're not paralyzed by fear, but they're not heedless of danger either. They have courage. They're brave in the right way at the right time and for the right reason. It's all about that calibration.
It is.
Let's try to apply this to a modern problem, something we see all the time. What about ambition, our work ethic?
Oh, that's a great one. Because the modern world really pushes us to one extreme.
It really does.
Okay, so if you have a deficiency of ambition, you might fall into what he'd call sloth. Laziness. You don't meet your responsibilities, you underachieve, you're not contributing what you could.
But the other side, the vice of excess, that's what we call burnout, right? Or the dark side of hustle culture.
Exactly. That person is ambitious to a fault. They never rest. They sacrifice their health, their family, their ethics, all for the sake of another accomplishment.
So the mean, the virtue, isn't just working a moderate amount.
No, it's more nuanced. It's proper ambition or industry. It's about applying your efforts diligently and appropriately, knowing when to push, and just as importantly, knowing when to rest and recover. It's a constantly moving target.
And that's the crucial insight here, the thing that I think gets missed so often. Virtue is a target. I mean, think about archery. When you're aiming for a target, there are infinite ways to miss it.
Too high, too low, left, right.
A million ways to miss.
Yeah.
But there is only one way, a single tiny point, to hit the bullseye.
And that's why this framework is so powerful. It just shatters the idea that being a good person is easy or that it's about having, nice intentions.
Right, but hard work.
It's incredibly difficult. It requires constant active calibration. It demands precision in every single situation.
But I do have a question here, a challenge to the framework. If virtue is always this relative mean between two extremes, doesn't that sort of suggest that all morality is subjective? I mean, Aristotle is pretty clear that some things, like theft, are just always wrong.
Right.
So how does that work? If honesty is a virtue, where's the line between telling the truth and, the vice of being brutally blunt when a situation really needs tact?
That's an excellent challenge, and he does address it. Aristotle says the mean is relative to us, but it's not arbitrary. He argues that certain actions, like murder or theft, are just inherently vicious. They don't have a mean, there's no virtuous amount of murder.
Okay, that makes sense.
But for most character traits, generosity, patience, courage, the calibration is totally situational. And that's why we needed more than just a definition. We need a system, a way to train ourselves to find that precise point.
Which brings us to what I think is the most empowering part of this entire philosophy. If virtue is a skill that needs precision, well, that means you're not stuck with the character you have now.
You can change.
You can actually change. Aristotle has that famous quote, one of the most famous in all of Western philosophy.
We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit.
That line is just, it's foundational.
It is. This is where ancient Greek philosophy stops being theoretical and becomes profoundly practical. Aristotle believed your character, your ethos, in Greek, is literally the sum of your habits.
It's not something you're born with.
Not at all. If you want to become a generous person, you can't just sit around wishing you were more generous. You have to perform generous acts over and over and over again until it becomes second nature.
So you almost have to fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
You actively perform the role of the virtuous person until it becomes who you actually are.
That's a perfect way to put it. Initially, those actions feel fake. They feel forced, they take a lot of energy, it's a conscious effort. But think of it like building muscle memory when you learn an instrument.
Okay.
Over time, those neural pathways and what you could call your social muscles, they adapt. You build a new default setting. And eventually, you don't have to consciously think, should I hold my tongue right now?
Right.
The virtuous action just becomes automatic.
It transforms from a forced choice into just a part of your character.
Exactly.
So if habits are the engine that moves us toward the center of that slider, what's the steering wheel? Who's the driver in a complicated, messy situation that you've never seen before? Life is rarely a simple test.
Right.
And that brings us to this beautiful, complex idea called phronesis, practical wisdom.
Ah, yes. Phronesis is really the crown jewel of Aristotelian ethics. It's not abstract knowledge, like knowing geometry or physics. It is the ability to look at a messy, morally ambiguous, unique human situation and just instinctively know where the golden mean is.
Without a rule book.
Without a rule book. It's the highest form of mastery.
So it's not just about being smart. It sounds more like ethical intuition or maybe emotional intelligence applied to these really complex moments. You have to feel the right move.
You feel it because you've trained your character so deeply. Let's go back to the master chef analogy, but give it a bit more weight.
Okay.
A novice chef, they need a recipe. They need a precise measuring cup for the salt. The master chef, they can smell the dish, they can look at the ingredients, and they just know. They know if a little more salt is needed because of the humidity in the kitchen that day.
They've internalized the skill so deeply that the right action is just instantaneous.
Precisely. And in life, you need phronesis most when the rules conflict. For example, a friend is grieving. How much support is the right amount of support?
That's a great question. Because too much constant contact can be smothering. That's a vice of excess.
But too little contact is neglect, a vice of deficiency. And no rulebook can tell you whether to call daily or weekly. Phronesis is the wisdom to read that person, read that situation, and instinctively know the ethically perfect course of action.
The goal, then, is instinctive, calibrated excellence.
That's the goal.
Okay, so let's talk about the big picture payoff here. Why are we doing all this hard work, this calibration, this character building? The goal, as we said at the start, is eudaimonia, flourishing. But we really need to define that against what our modern culture sells us as happiness.
Yeah, that distinction is critical. Modern culture's idea of happiness is usually what philosophers call hedonic happiness. It's shallow, it's sensory, it's focused on fleeting pleasure.
It's the dopamine hit from a social media like.
Exactly, or the simple enjoyment of a good meal. Aristotle was very, very critical of making these things the goal of your life. He famously dismissed the pursuit of mere pleasure as the life of grazing cattle.
Ouch. But it makes sense because it's passive. Right. If your well-being depends on something external, like sugar, compliments, you're not in control of your own state of being. You're just reacting.
Exactly. Eudaimonia, on the other hand, is active. It's the deep, lasting satisfaction of a life well lived, a life fully engaged. It's that profound sense of alignment a craftsman feels when they finish a masterpiece.
Or a surgeon after a successful, complex operation.
Yes, it's that feeling of being in the zone, where your higher skills and your virtues are perfectly aligned and pointed toward a meaningful goal.
And to get to that powerful, active state, you have to lean into the friction. You can't just coast through life being passively nice. You have to actively and with radical honesty identify where your own dials are set, where your deficiencies and excesses lie.
And that self-assessment is the hardest part, because we are experts at rationalizing our extremes. The sources give us some really clear questions derived from this framework you can ask yourself.
Like,
Well, are you routinely a pushover? Do you constantly say yes when you mean no? If so, you have a deficiency of self-respect. Or maybe proper ambition. You need to turn that dial up.
or the opposite. Maybe you alienate people because you think you have to be brutal and overly critical and you hide behind the excuse of just being honest.
That's a perfect example of an excess of honesty. It's just bluntness. And that dial needs to be turned down toward tact and kindness.
What about wit? The sources mention that.
Yeah, deficiency of wit. If you're consistently seen as boring or overly serious, you lack the social grace to engage with people appropriately. The daily challenge Aristotle sets for you is to look in the mirror and ask, which way do I habitually lean, and which way do I need to slide my dial to get back to the mean?
This all sounds great in theory, but it can feel complex in practice. Well, let's get into the roadmap, the 4-step habit stack challenge or the virtue audit that you can apply, right now.
Okay, step 1 is the most important for success. Pick one virtue. Just one. Do not try to overhaul your entire character at once. That's a recipe for failure. Choose something manageable and immediate, like truthfulness or patience. Focus your energy like a laser.
Okay, step 2. This is the moment of truth. It requires that radical, unvarnished honesty we talked about. Identify your lean.
You have to admit your default setting. So for truthfulness, do you lean toward deficiency, hiding facts, telling little white lies to smooth things over? Or do you lean toward excess, oversharing, using truth as a weapon through bluntness?
Be honest with yourself.
You have to be. Now, step 3 is where Aristotle gives us this secret counterintuitive trick for recalibrating, the overcorrection.
The overcorrection.
Yes. So if you discover you're deficient in an area, let's say you're habitually non-confrontational, a bit of a coward, Aristotle, suggests that for a day, maybe 2, you deliberately try to act a little bit toward the opposite extreme, maybe even a little bit reckless.
Wait, hold on a second. If I'm already too far one way and I try to act reckless, isn't that just replacing one self-destructive vice with another one?
It seems like it. Yeah.
What's the guarantee I'll magically stop in the middle? Why not just tell us to aim for the middle gradually?
That's the tension we have to sit with. His rationale is that your existing habits are so strong, they're like a deeply bent stick. Your character is firmly bent toward one extreme.
Okay.
If you just try to nudge that bent stick gently toward the center, it's not going to work. The bend is too strong. To truly straighten it, you have to deliberately bend it with some force in the opposite direction.
I see. So it's like you're shocking the system. You're trying to overshoot the mean on purpose, just for a moment, to break your old social muscle memory out of its comfortable rut.
That's it, exactly.
By intentionally risking the opposite vice, say by being a little too blunt instead of hiding the truth, you discover the discomfort of that new extreme.
Precisely. That temporary overcorrection makes you feel the friction of the opposite vice. It gives you a new, more accurate reference point for what the true middle feels like. Once you've felt the discomfort of both extremes, your old default and your new intentional one, you are finally capable of identifying and settling into the true, stable mean.
That makes perfect sense. It's about resetting the whole equilibrium of your ethical operating system.
And that leads to the final step, step 4. Track the result. After you do this, notice how you feel when you manage to hit that middle ground. Notice how other people respond to you when you achieve genuine, calibrated truthfulness or patience or generosity.
And that feeling
That feeling of profound alignment, that deep active satisfaction, that is eudaimonia. That's the reward.
That's such a robust and deeply practical framework. It moves right from abstract theory into the daily practice of excellence. This has been great. We've covered so much. The idea that excellence is a habit you build, not an act.
That virtue is a precise, moving target, the mean.
And that our ultimate goal should be this active state of flourishing, eudaimonia, over just fleeting hedonistic happiness.
And as you go forward this week, thinking about calibrating your own virtue dial, here's a final thought for you, drawn from the sources. Aristotle believed there are 3 distinct types of friends you can have in your life.
Okay.
But he argued that only one of those types of friendship is worth truly investing in. In fact, it's the only type that is worth potentially dying for.
Wow. That idea of virtuous friendship, that is definitely a topic we need to tackle in a future deep dive, for sure.
Absolutely.
Until then, remember that virtue is a bullseye, not a spectrum. Keep aiming for the center.